The moment has arrived, everybody watching, to talk about Spyro Reignited Trilogy. The wait's finally over. The game that everyone has been talking about for weeks on end, that's been discussed by thousands within the community. The game we've been looking forward to since April, and the game that's been delayed to give this trilogy that extra time needed to work out as many kinks as possible for what was initially supposed to be their September release. Behind the hands of Toys for Bob, the people who've actually had history with Spyro since the Skylander series, these people were given the task of developing these beautiful remakes of Spyro the Dragon, Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, and Spyro Year of the Dragon, originally developed by Insomniac Games. And you know, after the success of the Insane Trilogy with Crash Bandicoot, this was too great an opportunity to pass up on. And for full disclosure, I love what they did with the Insane Trilogy. This here went and topped all that in so many ways that I'd be here all week if I were to list them all in great detail. There were plenty of things I've enjoyed, some mild frustrations, some weird moments here and there, but all in all, my experience with Reignited Trilogy was definitely worth the wait. All this said, let's hop right into it because I'm that pumped to talk about it, I want to cut right to the chase. Spoiler warning for people who've yet to play this game for themselves, and with that, we're on our way. This is Spyro Reignited Trilogy, and I'm here to discuss all that I've experienced with it. Now, as someone who's played the original Spyro games in reverse order, with Year of the Dragon being my first game, then finishing the trilogy with Spyro the Dragon, I figured it'd be best if I play them all accordingly this time, right proper. Regardless of the fact, hopping into Reignited Trilogy should be no problem for any Spyro veterans and newcomers alike. And because these are remakes of the original Spyro trilogy, I can't really explain anything story-wise as I did before, other than the fact that you're a tough as nails purple dragon with attitude, on a quest to gather gems and collectibles and put a stop to Nasty Nork, Ripto and the Sorceress, completely in HD with astounding visuals and gameplay. And since I'm on the topic, the gameplay of Reignited Trilogy felt really good to control. Perhaps the best Spyro controls I've ever played in a long time. And said controls are incredibly smooth. He can prance about, flame away at enemies, charge freely, jump and glide, and more importantly, roll and dodge enemy projectiles much like he did in Spyro 1. Still feels entirely situational and provides little use. But hey, the fact that this can be used in all three games now does open up a lot of doors for situations where rolling could especially come in handy in Ripto's Rage and Year of the Dragon, so no further complaints here. To put it bluntly, Spyro's controls in this game feel like a huge merging of how he played in all three games across the board. The only difference being that much like the original Spyro, he can't hover to give himself that extra heightened distance in Spyro 1, but Spyro 2 and 3 allows for that hovering mechanic all the same. Perhaps the biggest thing I'm grateful to this trilogy for is the fact that you can now control the camera around with the right stick. Really lets you take a great look at all these fantastic worlds and levels, appreciating the new graphics and outstanding visuals and designs. And though I never really used it in my playthrough, there's a map system in place for those who may feel lost playing these games. And remember how Sparks can identify where the nearest gems are? You can now do that at any given time by clicking down the left stick, making treasure hunting feel much better this time across all three games. Hell, I don't even mind backtracking in 2 and 3 this time around, as now you also have the option to warp to any level you want on the fly through the guidebook menu. Really helps to keep that steady pace afloat. And allow me to be a total nerd and say I love how they handled the music this time around. Stuart Copeland's great work has been refined all over with the help of Stefan Vankov. I greatly apologize if I've butchered the name. And for the most part, the effort really paid off. And the new dynamic feature in this game's soundtrack is great. If you're standing idle for about 10 seconds, the music goes into this relaxing chill mode. When you're inside a building, the music will bounce off the walls. Charging adds that extra percussion to really make it feel like you're ramming through everything in your path. It's all just brilliant. And should you not be happy with the Reignited soundtrack whatsoever, there's always an option to switch to the original soundtrack for those who want it exactly how they remember it. So, you know, worked out for everyone. Also, nothing important, but I also love how you can play around in the loading screen to pass the time. Boredom be gone! Now, throughout every moment, from Spyro 1 to the very end of Year of the Dragon, one of the many things I must discuss is this game's presentation. To say this game is simply beautiful just wouldn't be enough to describe it. While the Insane Trilogy simply improved the look of Crash Bandicoot with stellar graphics and a new coat of paint, Reignited Trilogy's art style just definitely tops that of Insane by a long shot. Virtually a great chunk of the Dragon Worlds, Avalar, and the Forgotten Realms are much more lively than I can ever imagine them being. and every bit of it just blew me away. The designs of these worlds are that great. The new and improved graphics really do breathe more life into these worlds. Realms like Magic Crafters, Dreamweavers, and even Beastmakers in the case of Spyro 1 are much more breathtaking and presentable than I could ever imagine. The home worlds of Avalar are like a dream come to life, to the point of almost bringing tears down my face upon witnessing the beauty of Summer Forest and Anna Plains. Even Winter Tundra is as amazing as ever. Spyro 3's worlds are especially lovely and great to look at, be it Enchanted Towers, Charmed Ridge, Fireworks Factory. It's all so colorful, and I've got to praise Toys for Bob for that extra mile in ensuring these level designs stick with us as much as they did in the original PlayStation. On a side note, while Toys for Bob did a great chunk of the work in the Reignited Trilogy, it's not until recently that I learned that Year of the Dragon especially was handled by Zanzaru Games. Guess they needed all the help they could get to reach that deadline, you know? For the record, I know for a fact that they had very little sources to work with from Insomniac. To work their way around this, they created a tool called Spyroscope, which displays all the level details they need to serve as a base for enhancing the worlds and graphics of Spyro the Dragon. That is impressive for what it's worth. All done in a month's worth too, if memory serves me right. Speaking of impressive, the character designs. Man, do we need to talk. I realize the design of these characters stem to have a strange case of different strokes, different folks, meaning not everyone's going to walk away from this game satisfied with everything they see. This seems to be more so the case for Spyro 2 and 3, as I don't hear that many complaints about the dragons for Spyro 1. Nonetheless, I know I'm going to have some opinions that may differ from what many may say, so if you disagree with what I have to say about the character designs and even voice work for that matter, please be civil and try not to start any flame wars. I'm not looking to be attacked here. Now that I'm on this topic, for the most part, I was pleasantly surprised with what this game offered. The fact that these people looked at these aged, expressionless polygons from the PS1 and reimagined them in so many ways while still keeping as much of the spirit of their original designs intact as possible is absolutely staggering. The amount of creative liberties taken on these characters really shine throughout and breathe a whole new atmosphere into each and every one of them. And since I brought them up, I may as well applaud their efforts and say that every single dragon you free in Spyro 1 are vastly unique, incredibly distinct, and so damn cool to look at. Not one of these models are recycled, copied and pasted, or reused whatsoever. So you can definitely look at these guys individually and say, oh yeah, this is Argus. Alright, cool, this is Cletus. Hey, look, it's Apara. And adding on to that, each dragon share a unique theme based on the worlds they're in. Artist dragons reside in the Artisan realm, warrior dragons in the Peacekeepers, wizards and sorcerers, magic crafters, the list goes on. Needless to say, this was a well-needed change, and it really shows which game in the trilogy got the most love and care put into it. And honestly, I don't blame him for that. I can join right in and say these dragons are just simply awesome to check out. To highlight some favorites here and there in one breath, Nevin, Gildas, Devlin, Jarvis, Lyle, Mudada, Revilo, Zikomo, Kazia, Cyrus, Altair, Trondo, Halvor, Jed, and Alvar.
I'm getting a little winded.
Not wanting to forget about the purple boy himself, Spyro is just flawless. They did absolute justice in both his design and his dialect. Tom Kenny now voices Spyro all across 3 games, allowing for a great sense of consistency throughout this trilogy. Also meaning that he no longer sounds like a nasally obnoxious brat, much like he did in 1998.
Where's Nasty Nork? I'll torch him.
Where's Nasty Nork? I'll torch him.
And Sparks the Dragonfly is of course adorable, especially when he's waving to us with his newfound limbs. Still can't talk to save his life though. It's absolutely hilarious. Helps that his levels in Spyro 3 are a dream to play through as well, so that's a definitive plus. Now for the games that followed. The designs of everyone in Avalar and the Forgotten Realms are absolutely off the charts. To give a much shorter answer for all the NPCs I encountered, there were some I honestly really liked, some that outright made me laugh, several I wish were more than just simple palette swaps of others, and few that either didn't translate well with me or I thought were just okay at best, applying to both character design and voice work. But all in all, they feel rather different. On the plus side, they also serve a bit of variety, as some NPCs have different colors or accessories so you know exactly who you're talking to. All in all, just good stuff. To give you a longer answer for pretty much everyone else, let's start with our trio of villains. Nasty Nork is exactly the big, menacing brute I've always pictured him being, perhaps even better. Not a whole lot to really address, at least for now anyway. Ripto is even more menacing and sinister looking than ever, and it's personally all just awesome. And Greg Berger does a solid job performing this shrimp once again, though honestly there are some moments where I'm convinced he's rather out of practice. Sometimes I feel his voice is a bit too gruff, to the point where it almost sounds like he's channeling someone else entirely.
Dragon, you are really starting to get on my nerves. Say goodbye, flame breath.
This nitpick aside though, I feel Ripto here gets a solid A. The Sorceress, on the other hand, I'm kind of in two different minds when it comes to her performance. I mean, if I'm to be honest here, her design in general looks just fine. She actually looks like something right out of a Disney movie. Ugly but presentable. And to their credit, they really nailed that here. However, her voice portrayal is something much different for me altogether.
Yes! It will smash them and crush them and grind them and tear them!
Oh, yes! Smear them and smush them and crack them and grease them!
On the flip side, I do like the way they went about this portrayal. She starts out calm and regal, and as the game goes on, she gets more and more aggressive until the big showdown, making the story progression feel much more natural. Now, is it better than the original? Absolutely not, but it's nothing I'll be losing any sleep over. It's nothing terrible, just much too different for my liking. Going from villains to friendly faces, Bianca is now as cute as a button. Absolutely flawless in design, her performance is much more heartfelt and genuine. You'll end up loving her so much by the end. Bonus points being that she's now voiced by Clementine of The Walking Dead.
Look here, Dragon. If you know what's good for you, you'll turn around and crawl back into that hole you came through.
Hunter took some time to get used to, but I'm personally down with his new portrayal. He's a lot more expressional, he has this rather nice stylized design going for him, and he sounds a lot less like a sarcastic stoner talking down to you at least 90% of the time.
You might be able to beat me at skateboarding, but I still get all the chicks.
And a lot more like an actually lovable oaf, as he's meant to be.
You might be able to beat me at skateboarding, but I'd still win in a popularity contest.
Goes to show that a new set of vocal cords can go a long way. Professor's design feels somewhat different, but with him being a mole, his newfound blindness makes a bit of logical sense actually, and his voice delivery still as excellent as ever. Not much to add here. Zoe is absolutely adorable, extremely bright and colorful, and having an even prettier voice on top of that helps her stand out all the more. Moneybag simply looks and feels a lot more like the sinister, conniving bastard I've always thought he was, both in design and dialect, which feels a lot like a mishmash of both his performances in 2 and 3. Still rather satisfying to see him get his comeuppance. Never gets old. And Alora...
What are you, some kind of goat?
I'm a fawn, you dork.
Oh my... I don't think words can even begin to describe how much justice has been done to her. Knowing how much I've adored her before, this revamp single-handedly cranked that love up to infinite. It's absolutely amazing, and they really upped her overall performance. She's much more deer-like now, she's extremely cute, so sweet and friendly, her voice is much more adorable and genuine, and, you know, I'm pretty sure someone over at Toys for Bob ships these two to high heaven as well as the rest of us. It's all just perfect chemistry. Bottom line, Alora is just great, and I absolutely love her to death. Feels wonderful to see her again after all these years. Now I'm gonna go over my lifelong buddies in Spyro 3, as well as break down how they perform in gameplay to keep things more organized for this section. Personally, it's kind of funny to see how Sheila turned out, knowing she definitely received the most changes out of everybody here, especially if you go back and compare how she looked back in the day. Me personally, it's all good though, I don't really mind this one bit. If I'm to be honest, it's pretty weird at first, but after a while, Sheila's overall portrayal from her more personalized design to her voice work really warmed right up to me. Her gameplay took me a bit to adapt to though. For some weird reason, I'm convinced the timing on the ground jump requires you to be a bit more precise, but I feel I've gotten the hang of it with enough practice. In short, Sheila's okay. I like this. I'm probably jumping the gun with this opinion, but Sergeant Byrd I feel they really knocked out of the park with. His design is absolute perfection, and his dialect is much more lively for a military penguin. And honestly, Tom Kenny still does an excellent job with this guy.
Sergeant Byrd, 90068. Awaiting orders, sir.
And allow me to praise his controls for a moment. No longer does Sergeant Byrd's flight movement feel momentum-based. His floatiness feels reduced quite a bit, making him more tight and actually fun to fly around with. And holy mother of God, his missiles. They home in really damn good. It's actually hilarious. So is his movement on the ground, which I'm pretty sure feels somewhat faster than his waddling from the original. Bottom line, Sergeant Byrd is awesome. Bentley here was somewhat of a pleasant surprise. His overall design is great, and his voice gives me major flashbacks of one of my favorite NPCs in Skylands. In the gameplay department, he has more of an over-the-shoulder perspective, and while I don't really mind it so much, it can be really troublesome and problematic in certain areas. On the flip side, I feel his gameplay got a great chunk of improvements. He feels faster on foot, his club swings are so much quicker, it's that good. His spin move requires a bit more timing as I know there's a bit of a delay in performing it. In general, I feel he got changed for for the better. And thank the heavens above that his Yeti boxing challenge has been toned down in difficulty. No longer do I feel frustrated playing this mission, which is a big improvement in its own right, but at the same time, it kind of feels like watching two Rock'em Sock'em robots duking it out. Personally though, I'll gladly take this over being put on the verge of rage quitting any day.
Aurora Borealis.
Agent 9 felt a lot more like a wake-up call. He's still the fun and lovable spaz I've known him to be, his original voice still intact and everything. It's his gameplay, however, that really opened my eyes for a moment. He plays like a third-person shooter now, allowing for more accurate shots, and his speed has been greatly touched upon. Now, upon comparing how he played before, this made me stop and think. Was he really always this clunky? I said during Spyro 3 I had no trouble with his control scheme whatsoever, but man, this was a life changer. Agent 9 needed these changes as he was much slower on the ground. It was actually tricky to fire your laser blasts, ultimately requiring on sniper mode to get the job done. Here though, that's no longer an issue and I'm extremely grateful for that. And before I forget, the baby dragons are still as cute as they were 18 years ago. Though as far as character models go, I feel they got the short end of the stick as they only have 2 in variety while providing different colors and accessories all the while. I do like the chubby dragons more than the skinny ones though. Another major improvement I love with this trilogy is the cinematics. It's amazing how they took these simply animated cutscenes from years ago and reimagined them with so much life and emotion put into each of them. This speaks true across all 3 games for the record. From every time you release a dragon, to the world you explore around Avalar, to releasing your friends in Spyro 3. In Spyro 1's case, I can now say this game is indeed the direct result of the dragon's trashy nasty Nork on live television, as I've always been speculating for years. It's downright hilarious. Most of the dialogue is virtually the same, but with great animation to back it up all the way. I say mostly because there are some adjustments here and there. Namely, some dragons no longer simply say,
"Thank you for releasing me,"
upon freeing them. Sure, there are some that still hold this torch, funnily enough.
Thank you for releasing me.
Thank you for releasing me.
Thank you for releasing me.
But in general, more dialogue has been added to breathe new life into these selective dragons.
Thank you for releasing me, Spyro. You can always check your progress by accessing the guidebook through the pause menu.
And as for Spyro 3, remember how upon entering a boss battle, you simply see your cage buddies in the background for a second or two? Here they're brought to the forefront and have actual words to say. And as someone who loves Year of the Dragon, I freaking love this, as it helps to really add to their characters, as well as making our rescuing them all the more worthwhile. But let's be real here. While Reignited Trilogy succeeded in breathing new life into these marvelous gems, there are a couple things here and there that struck me as pretty weird and strange. First and foremost, I know for a fact that people have been reporting all sorts of bugs and glitches since this game released. I've heard stories of a double Ripto boss fight, out of bounds exploits, frame rate issues, or worst case scenario, lost save files. I've never really encountered anything that game-breaking, but I did notice several bugs in my run. For one, the whale in Evening Lake just seems to be freaking out on me as if it's coming down with something. I don't remember this thing spazzing out the last time I played Spyro 3. I still managed to get the egg and head back out no problem though, but I'm far convinced this thing has a mind of its own at times. There were also several instances where Sparks just outright refuses to pick up any gems in sight, even if they're standing right in front of me. It's really annoying to say the least, and I know I'm not the only one to encounter this. Perhaps the freakiest of all these glitches I met is, funnily enough, with Sergeant Bird at one instance. As I was picking up this idle head in Molten Crater and started flying upward, the camera decides to just cut out of bounds, booming the noise you hear at the exit portal at full volume. Needless to say, it gave me one hell of a jolt, and the only way I could fix this is to exit the area and head back in. And I know it's not just this one area where it happens, it also happens in Sergeant Bird's base as well, but luckily enough I've never had any camera issues there last time I played it. So for the life of me, I'm wondering what's causing this glitch, and I'm praying like hell this gets patched as well as the others I've mentioned. And talking about frame rate issues, it's nothing terrible, and I did encounter this as late as some of the later sections in Year of the Dragon, but those moments were few and far in between, so it doesn't really bother me as much as others. Glitches and technical issues aside, let's get back to the controls. Because while moving Spyro around is great, there are some moments that tend to throw me for a loop. I don't know if this fault lies with the player or the game specifically, but while gliding is great for the most part, it tends to feel pretty tight at times, as I jump, glide, and fall right off thinking I'd be able to make that spot no problem. This I've encountered more with the first game than the other two for the record. And while we're here, supercharging for the most part feels fine. Though this I haven't noticed until I got to 3, but the supercharging has more of a momentum based system where you go even faster the longer you're in supercharge mode. Don't know if this is to blame exactly, but it does make objectives like going through treetops even more challenging to deal with, and that level's already on thin ice in the Spyro community as it is. And to me personally, the flying controls do cause problems in speedways and flight levels. I feel it's much easier to miss a target if you're not careful, and this is coming from someone who's never had any problems with speedways before. Even racing has become harder to get a grip on, which I always thought was a fun but challenging concept. Putting this as simply as I can, actually being able to control Spyro in flight feels a lot like trying to maneuver a heavy-set jet airplane, and I really wish these controls would have been touched upon just a bit more. Then we have select vehicle controls. For the record, I always loved skateboarding in Spyro 3, and the new tweaks in physics are for the most part just fine. But for the life of me, I swear it's more precise than ever to properly land this thing, making it even easier to wipe out if you're getting careless with those radical tricks. And is it just me, or is the racing segment much more difficult thanks to these new controls? If I had a nickel for every time I was forced to start the race over due to badly timed jumps and stunts. Some minigames with fixed cameras no longer have this feat. I feel this was largely due to the fact that you can control the camera freely, and while that's understandable, it can be very problematic in missions like escorting the alchemist in Spyro 2 or those damn Firefly twins in Spyro 3. At the very least, the latter is merciful enough not to spawn any rocks you've kicked beforehand with Sheila, but stomping mushrooms is still a major headache. Even whacking moles with Bentley is more difficult because of his over-the-shoulder perspective. This is where I feel they should have had a fixed camera of some kind to at least see while you're bashing entirely. Since I'm talking about these, for the most part, a great chunk of the minigames in 2 and 3 hold up relatively well. Some just tend to play out differently than others is all. Some feeling easier than before, while others get more challenging than before. And no, I still had no
trouble with the trolley, eh?
This minigame I still feel was easy as cake, as someone who's memorized the course hundreds of thousands of times. Now, I can't really say too much about the boss fights given they're virtually point for point with the original games. All I can really address is that the Spyro 1 bosses are still the underwhelming pushovers I remember them being, even Nasty Nork himself. Really a damn shame they didn't give him some sort of a proper finale. Spyro 2's bosses are still as energetic and challenging as they were last time, though this time I feel they really went all out with Gulp, making him perhaps the hardest boss in this entire trilogy, period. And Spyro 3's bosses feel rather different, kinda due to the camera angle and how some of the bosses have been toned down in difficulty, this being the most notable with Spike, who gave me such a hard time many years ago. And on a side note, whoever made that gaming journal review stating that fighting Buzz is as hard as Dark Souls has apparently never played a video game before, and this is the first boss, mind you, ridiculously easy. Some bosses feel easier, some feel tougher. How they hold up in the end will really be up to you to decipher. The end reward for all 3 games is still as satisfying as ever, and since skill points are now part of all 3 games as opposed to just 2 and 3 exclusively, collecting them all gives you concept art to check out. It's a shame we don't get anything like the epilogue extras they gave us before, but in this case the artwork we get is at least worth forgiving the fact. And in the end, was it really all worth the wait? Worth the time invested playing through all 3 games and the hours and days I spent? In a word, undoubtedly. Across all 3 games, they did an amazing job with Spyro 1. Spyro 2 feels different in some areas, and not that many people are going to like said changes, but it's still worth playing all things considered. And Spyro 3 is still as fun and great as I've always remembered it being. My only hope is that they clear out all these kinks in the future patch. And as a whole, my time with the Reignited Trilogy has been an exciting ride from beginning to end. It's such a shame my experience with it has to end so soon, but I'll definitely love coming back to it sometime. Maybe we might get some DLC somewhere down the line. For $40, it's absolutely worth picking up if you want to experience Spyro and his friends at their finest, even if there are some rough edges every now and then. And I want to take this time to personally thank Toys for Bob as well as Sanzaru Games for their time and effort into bringing all these 3 games back to life. And I've definitely enjoyed my time with the Reignited Trilogy all in all. The question I'm to ask myself though, what's next? Well, for now, I'm just gonna sit back and relax for a couple weeks. Who knows, I've still got a lot to check out in the world of Spyro. For the time being, I'd say the sky's the limit. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be seeing you guys sometime soon. Take care and have a good one. And don't even think I forgot about covering Super Smash Bros.